Hello, I'm Michael Rose and I'm going to be taking you through the design principles of Duskfall. Duskfall is a game that is trying to combine the modern melee combat systems found in games like Dead Cells, Blasphemous and Dark Souls with the traditional FPS like Original Doom, or a better example would be Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall. As you can see in the background here on the main menu, I've tried to recreate the visuals of those older traditional games with the pixelization of the screen, as well as pixel art to help create that effect, but also still having more modern lighting and visuals like that. So if we just jump into the game here, straight off the bat, you can see we start here in this prison cell, and right out the door where you'll see a pile of gold to help breadcrumb the player towards the next area, in which you'll find the first enemy, which is a melee enemy, which will just chase the player, has a chance to leap at the player if the distance between them is a bit too great, to prevent them from just, as you can see, just backing up and just kiting them around. That leap is to put some threat on the player. As for what the player can do, as you can see, I've got this block and attack, as well as a parry ability and a charge attack. Yeah, as I said, we just start off with one enemy initially, just get them player familiar with combat, from which obviously we follow through and find another enemy. Yet again, just the one. This is a second opportunity for the player to learn a bit more about combat before we ramp up the difficulty and increase the number of them. As you can see, there's also a stamina meter and a health bar. So the stamina is used for blocking, parrying, attacking, and if you run out of stamina, you won't be able to do any of those things, so you will need to manage it. Obviously, at this point, we've taken a hit. For new players, they will have likely have taken at least one hit across those two enemies, and so this will give them the opportunity to learn that healing vials obviously heal you, and that's how you heal yourself. They're found across the level, that it's not like an item you carry. Now, following this, we enter a room where we now ramp up the difficulty a bit by providing 2 more enemies. There you go. So after that, we move on into the next level, which is the first initial basic puzzle. You can see obviously some more healing items and a locked door, demonstrated by the lock, and then a staircase nicely breadcrumbed to the gold breadcrumbing the player up it, and which will lead you to a singular lever and a view to the door. This helps teach the player between the correlation between switches and doors. As I said, this is a very basic level, basic puzzle, just to get the player familiar with what they can do and the rules of the game. As I said, to watch out for switches and what they look like. After which the door will shut behind you, preventing you from going back and now entering this next part of the level, the town. Here we get a moment to breathe and take in the surroundings before we move on, from which you'll see a large gate which will block your path from going down the hill, and obviously up the path you'll see some gold to help lead you this way, and which will lead you also to our new enemy type, which is a ranged enemy which casts fireballs at you. He works by, as I said, casting a projectile at you, and if you get too close, he'll start to move away. The projectiles can be dashed past, as well as they can be blocks, but you can't parry them. This is now a bit of an open area where, if you see over here, you can see a breakable wall. Obviously, to people who play a lot of games, this signifies probably like a secret or something of the sort. Which obviously, if you break, you can see gold into there. But for obviously newer players who perhaps aren't familiar with the gaming language, they might not know that, and but that's all right, because we will be teaching the archetype of breakable objects a bit later in the level. That's just a bonus secret. Now up here we are confronted with two enemies yet again, but this time one of each type, a melee and a ranged, as this now should provide a more interesting dynamic. After this, we are presented with a bridge again, with again just one enemy. Now you're more limited in your movement space, and so are more having to face him more one-on-one, as well as just a kind of ramp down from having to fight those two, which now leads us on to our next area, which is the first major puzzle, as the one before was just an introduction. So first of all, we are presented with a as you can see, projectiles flying by. Obviously, again, this was taught a bit earlier with the ranged enemy, so that the player can recognize what a projectile looks like. This also helps teach the player, if they haven't already learned about blocking projectiles. This initial puzzle is split up into first 3 parts. This obviously first part, learning recognizing that these things shoot out projectiles, that projectiles can be blocked. And now we're presented with this large block with a sword on it and nowhere else to go, so obviously it's quite intuitive for the player to then want to attack it, from which you'll see that it moves, and then see another one of these holes also hitting it and knocking it. This introduces you to the movable pillar object, and you can see across the ground it moves along this engraved area. We just move it along. This is the, I guess, second part of the puzzle, obviously again introducing you to the movable pillar, in which then you are now presented with the last part, but the part where you can bind everything together. So as I said, you can see this little maze area across the floor, as well as a stairway, in which you come up here and you'll see a hole in the wall, and across the way you'll see some gold and another hole in the wall, kind of signifying to the player that that is where you need to go. You can see that you can get over there because there's gold, and so signifying that you need to get from this hole to that hole over there, and so you can see the pillar nicely lines up with the level of the platform over there, signifying that you have to do something with it. So if we start moving the pillar along and try and get it to near the hole in the wall on that side. See, getting it to move around, as the projectiles will knock it back if we're not careful. As well as you may have also noticed the switch over there. We'll come back to that in a second. This also teaches the player that some objects in the world are also interactable by hitting them. Right, now we've brought it just next to where the wall is, if you come over and use the switch, you can hear a timer playing, and you'll notice that this projectile spawner is now no longer producing projectiles while that timer is going. So this allows you to delay it for a moment while you knock it into position, go up the stairs, and then use this to carry you across the gap. So this is, as I said, the final part of this puzzle, introducing a few different factors, obviously the spawners and the movable pillar, from which we are then presented with this corridor, and on the floor you can see the breakable tile. So as mentioned before, with the secret room, obviously if you're experienced with the fact if something has cracks in it, it normally means it's breakable. So most players will know that this will probably break for them. Obviously, if you're new to games and that sort of thing, you won't necessarily know that. You'll probably wonder why it looks like that. But this helps. This is going to help teach the player that some things are breakable. This will be the actual first real introduction to fact some things are breakable. Now we fall into the crypt, where we are confronted by two more enemies. And from that we'll move on to the next room, where we'll face two more enemies, but this time two mages, and you'll see on the floor that there are breakable tiles. Obviously at this point the player will have obviously learned the correlation between the cracks and that things will break if you stand on them. So they will know not really to stand on them, because if you do, they will break, and you can see there's poisonous water, which if you fall into will take damage. So see, now this proves to have a bit more of a challenge to it, as it's more difficult for you to navigate nearer to the enemies while they shoot projectiles at you. So slowly ramping up the difficulty a bit more. From that we'll move up the stairs, and again you'll be confronted with a breakable wall. Obviously for, again, new players, they'll now see that crack signifies that it's breakable. This is another small puzzle. As you can see on this side, there's no clues to say it's breakable, but if you look through the bars on this side, you can see it's breakable. This again teaches the player that not only does the breakable things come in the form of things on the floor, but they can be on the wall, and they're not necessarily negative. Obviously in this case you need to break it to get to the switch. So if I just stock up, now press this, the doorway opens, and this now leads to the church. And the door shuts behind us, again preventing us from going back. Here is now a quite visual spectacle now, as it is a sudden change of environment with these large windows that bring in lots of light. And this is also where we now obviously bump up the difficulty just that little bit more, but now introducing 3 enemies. Obviously two melee and 1 ranged. obviously now at this point, as you may notice, there's also a crack on this wall, as the players might see when exploring the environment. Obviously now that they know, yes, this is a mechanic, obviously these can break, leading the player, obviously, if again new, to now understand that there are secrets in these levels, and obviously they might wish to go back and now replay part of the level again at the beginning to see if they missed any secrets, which obviously if they're new they would have missed that one under the bridge. Obviously now you're wondering where to go, obviously now leading you with more gold up this staircase, from which you'll be confronted with another pack of enemies. Now we come to a little bit of a navigation puzzle as we go into the final puzzle section of the game. See, this bit is just getting yourself across the wooden beams across the top of the church, and now starting to ascend up the bell tower, in which we are then obviously see nice lighting effects, as well as again meeting our old friend the movable pillar, in which this case now we use it in a more platformy sense, as if we try to get up to the higher level we're a bit too short. Before obviously we used it to in a more logical sense as a try to get it across. Now we're going to use it in a tiny bit more of a platforming sense. So this is a very simple one, just to again refresh on the mechanic, taking you up to the next level, and now bringing you to introducing you to a new element. So you see two pillars this time, ramping it up, and you can see obviously gold across that way, signifying that obviously you can get across, but it's just a bit too short for you to reach. So how do you get across? How are you going to use these pillars? Well, you start to try and play around with them and push them. You'll notice that they fall down, and then obviously you can now use it as a way of forming a little bridge across to now be able to leap across. Now we're confronted by the large church bell. Nice big loud audio impact to signify, you know, that something's happened obviously down below. So I encourage the player to now proceed from where they came to see what happened. Obviously as well, these, as because we are doing a traditional retro inspired FPS, obviously there's only looking left and right, there's no looking up and down, which is obviously mildly challenging for any verticality to a level. So as you see these torches sprinkled around, not only to provide some light to signal the player when they're coming from obviously that side to here, but also when they're coming back down the stairs to signify that they've now reached the pillar, obviously because from this angle it's difficult to see where the pathway ends. Now down here we'll see a now large hole in the church floor, which we will now descend into. Now this leads us to the final part of the game. As you can see, loads of healing items and what appears to be quite a big mob, so signifying a final boss fight, and just a little bit of extra gold on either side of the stairs. So here we go. Nice bit of visual indication that obviously it's a boss fight, one with obviously the health bar, but two, now that when you enter he roars, which shakes your screen and causes a bit of engagement. The boss is broken up into two phases. The first phase where he will shoot 3 projectiles at you and then do a quick roar and charge at you. The actual charge can be blocked and parried as well, because it is a melee hit. We're getting close to the second phase, in which he will again roar, knock you back, and he will now proceed to just continually charge you. So now at the end he'll die, resulting in the exit opening up, which will now lead to the end of the level. So here we are, back on the main menu. I hope you enjoyed me walking through the design behind the game, and thank you very much for watching.